Hi everybody.
Hi, Dr. Nick!
So, now that the mandatory joke is out of the way, let's get straight down to business. Many people say that high-resolution audio sounds much better than regular CD audio, and that's a claim that I will test today with a simple null test. This is going to be a long and boring, but hopefully also slightly helpful video. And the reason why it's going to be so long at least is because I don't want there to be any doubt about what I'm doing in this video. So I have chosen not to do any editing at all. I want you to see all the processes I'm going through. So there's going to be no doubt that there hasn't been any trickery involved here. And what I'm going to do today with this null testing, you can do at home completely for free. The programs I'm using are Audacity, which you see here, and Fubar. And then the Hi-rez music I'm using is mainly from 2L, which is an audiophile record company that releases music in Hi-rez. And as you might have already seen, my Audacity here is in Danish, because I'm from Denmark, hence my very sexy accent. And then there's another reason why I encourage you to do this at home. It's not only because it would be nice for you to try it yourself and see for your own eyes, with your own eyes, that you get the same results as me. It would also be because YouTube compresses the audio to 128 kilobits per second. So not only will you see with your own eyes that you get the same results as me, but you also get the full benefit that if you do it at home, you won't have to contend with 128 kilobits per second audio. And then therefore there also won't be any doubt about the results I'm showing here if you try this at home. Because yes, 128 kilobits per second does remove information. We all know that. So, in the description below, I will include links to 2L's website where you can find the samples that I'm using, the music samples. And I'll also include a link to a video on YouTube from the website called xiph.org, xiph.org, plus two articles from the website called Hi-rez, one about bit depth and one about sample rates. And lastly, I'll also include a link to a hearing test, which is something I'll get back to, along with all these other links I'm mentioning. So that's towards the end of the video. First, we'll do the null testing. And if you don't know what a null test is, a null test is taking two audio signals and then inverting the phase on one of them, and you subtract one from the other. And then what you hear is the difference. So that also means that if you don't hear anything, if there's just silence, that means there is no difference. Or at least there's no audible difference. So to illustrate how null test works, I'll show you this with MP3, because we already know that MP3 removes content in the audible range. So what I have done is I have already prepared two songs in MP3, 320 kilobits per second. And then I have inverted the phase on one of them. And then what I have also done is that some MP3 encoders add empty samples in the beginning of the encoded file. And I use lame in Fubar, and that adds empty samples in the beginning. And if I remember correctly, it adds 45 empty samples in the beginning. So I have removed those, because if you want to null two files, they have to be aligned perfectly. And if they're not, they won't play at the same time. Because what a null test does, I'll show you here, if we zoom in somewhere, it doesn't really matter where, is that this channel here, corresponds to this channel down here. So this channel here is the one down here, which you can't really see unless you scroll. So then you also see this one goes up here and then down, whereas down here it goes down and then up, because I have inverted the phase on this one. So that means that when this goes up, this channel, this goes down, and that means if they are identical, they will cancel each other out, right? Meaning, let's say +1 and -1 equals 0. So that's what a null test does. And therefore, if this one has been delayed by some samples, then they won't start at the same time. And then when this peak is here, and then this peak won't be at the same place in time, and therefore, obviously, they won't be able to cancel each other out. So therefore, I have removed these extra samples that the lame MP3 encoder adds in the beginning. And when I get to the Hi-rez nulling, it should also be noted that some resamplers, or sample rate converters as they're also called, also add empty samples in the beginning. And some of them also add, some of them also change the volume level. And the volume level has to be the same as well, because if this one is a little bit louder, that means it peaks a little bit higher than if this one is a little bit lower in volume. So then, of course, they won't be at the same place, and therefore they won't be able to null either. And I've already tried this, taken one song, just making a copy, and then just lowering the volume a little bit, and then flipping it, inverting the phase, and then trying to null them, and there was a difference, even though I just made a copy and then lowered the volume. So you simply can't null them if the volume level isn't the same and the alignment isn't identical either. Right? So it has to be in order before you can null something. I have used, for the Hi-rez, I use the resampler called the SOX resampler, which I'll show you later when I get to the nulling with Hi-rez. And that one doesn't change the volume, and it doesn't add any empty samples either. And that's a completely free resampler you can download and install in Fubar. And it works really well. So let's see how this works. This is a song by Lawrence Juber called Guitar Noir from the album of the same name. It is released on AIX Records, which is run by Mark Waldrep. And he's an interesting character. He was a Hi-rez advocate, and then he did a big experiment where he had 500 people participate in 2 rounds of Hi-rez versus CD quality. And he believed that there were differences that people could hear between Hi-rez and CD audio. And then he did this enormous experiment, and then after that was done, he publicly stated he has changed his opinion. Now he doesn't believe there's any advantage in Hi-rez. So let's see what this null test shows. Is there really any advantage? First, to illustrate, I'll use the MP3, and this is only to illustrate how a null test works. So for those of you who don't know Audacity, if I play this track here and press solo, it will only play this one track. And if I press solo on the other one, then it'll change to this one. And if I then press solo again on the one that's playing, it's going to play both songs simultaneously. And that means if both songs are identical, then they will just play louder. If I have inverted the phase, like I have done on this one, then they will play the difference, which is exactly what a null test is. So we'll start with soloing this one, and I'll change later to this one, and then play them together. So then you'll hear the difference. version, and then the wave. And then the difference. And you can see up here, the meters are moving, even though the difference is very small. We can go forward. Let's go back to soloing one. And then the other. And then again the difference. So, this is also a very simple song. Acoustic guitar, bass and percussion. So there wasn't much difference. I'll use another song here, which is by Paul Bearer, which is a heavy metal band. So this is a lot more complex song. And as you'll also be able to see here, this is a lot louder as well. It's a very dynamically compressed song. But you'll also be able to hear a bigger difference. But what I just showed you is how null-test works. And again, this is just an example to lead up to showing you how a Hi-rez file differs from a CD quality file. So let's listen to the first one. And I won't try to speak on top of this because it's so loud, so you won't be able to hear me. So I'll switch from this one to this one and then play the difference. So, this is also a small difference, but it's at least bigger than in the first song. But again, it's not much of a difference, but you can hear that there is a difference between the two. And what you're essentially listening to is what is missing in the MP3 file. Right, because it plays a difference. And we'll go back to soloing. And the difference again. So, that's how null testing works. And as you could hear, if there is a difference, you will be able to hear it in a null test. So let's try with Hi-rez music. And I have here, first, as you can see in the file name, 2 recordings from 2L. And then this MMMB is also Lawrence Juber from AIX Records. I would call Lawrence Juber's Guitar Noir the finest recording I've heard my entire life. You can buy it directly from AIX Records, from Mark Waldrep. Or you can do like I do, which is buy it on Amazon. I assume, at least when I bought it some years ago, it was on Amazon. So, Hi-rez consists of higher bit depth and higher sample rates than CD quality. So first, I will convert to 16-bit, and then we'll try nulling just for bit depth, and then afterwards for sample rates. And there's two ways you can do this, and I'll show you after converting these files. First, I'll just show you that these are high-resolution files, both here in foobar and also in Audacity. And then this is a WAV file, the MMMB, where the other two are FLAC files, and they are FLAC on 2L's website. So I haven't done anything. I've just downloaded them, and I haven't changed them in any way. So if you play this Lawrence Tuber one here, you'll see that it says 4,608 kilobits per second and 96,000 hertz. So that is the kilobit per second rate for 24-bit 96 kilohertz sampling rate. But FLAC removes redundant data, so these other two files will have a lower kilobit per second rate because they are not WAV. But you see this one now is 24-bit. And these ones lower because they're FLAC, but they are 24-bit that I've got directly from 2L's website. So first I convert them to 16-bit. So I just use the built-in converter in foobar and then choose quick convert and then 16-bit. And that's it. And then in the file name I just write 16 so we know that's the 16-bit. And the same thing for the other two files. So that's how you saw the kilobit per second rate. But there's also another way where you can see that this is Hi-rez, which is the sample rate. So I choose the original one here, the one that I haven't converted yet, and open it in Audacity. And then what you do is, if you press this small arrow here, then you open the menu, and there's one called spectrogram here. And it shows a very crude image that only goes to 8 kilohertz, and the resolution is very low, because that's the standard resolution. But then you can just go to spectrogram settings, as it says in Danish here. And then here, you choose to 48, or whatever you prefer, but 48 is the maximum, because this is a 96 kilohertz file. And then window size, that's what it means here in Danish, then anything from 4,000 and up looks good and doesn't look so crude. This here was 1,024. So anything above 4,000 looks good, in my opinion at least. And you press OK, and you see the numbers here change to 48. Right? So now you can see there's musical content all the way to 48 kilohertz. So then you know that this is a Hi-rez file, that a sample rate is Hi-rez. Let's go back to waveform, as it's a little bit nicer to look at. So then, for doing the null testing, then we can do one of two things, and I'll show you one of them first, obviously, and then afterwards I'll show you the other one. So what we need to do now that I've converted this one to 16-bit, and this is the original one, then now I just need to invert the phase on one of them, and then we can play them simultaneously and then hear the difference, just like with the MP3 file. And it doesn't matter which one you invert the phase on. So for this one I'll just do it on the original one, and then for the next file I can do it on the 16-bit one. So you go to Effect in the menu line, and you choose the one here called Invert. And maybe you saw that slight change there. But I'll zoom in so you can see it, like I did earlier. So then like I showed you with the MP3 file, this channel here corresponds to that channel down here. So you also see that when this one peaks here and it goes up, then down here it goes down. Maybe it's a little bit easier to see with these ones. This one goes down here, and that one goes up there. Or that one, which is a little bit wider, or maybe this one, which is a little bit wider peak. That goes up, where down here, it goes down. And since I use this converter built in here, and later I'll show you the SOX resampler, they don't add any extra samples, so these are aligned perfectly. So you don't have to do any extra work, just convert them and you're ready to go. So let's try to play them. Sorry, I'll just zoom out. So first we play them one at a time, and then so first I'll play this one, then switch, and then play them together. And then the other one. And then let's hear the difference. So what do you hear? You don't hear anything, do you? It's just silence. And notice something. These meters here have completely stopped moving, unlike with the MP3 file. There's no movement. It's just complete silence. And let's go forward to the loudest parts. Still nothing but utter silence. Let's go back to one of them. And the meters are started to move again, obviously. And the other one. And then together, the difference. And again, the meters stop moving. There is simply no difference here between 24-bit and 16-bit. And then what you can do then, the other way to null this is that you do like I've done here, which is invert the phase on one of them, and then you can go here to save to the file menu, and you choose export as wave. Before you do that, you have to make sure, especially when you try nulling sample rates, that down here it says 96 kilohertz and project speed. So export as wave, and then for some reason in Audacity you can't save for 24-bit. You can save 16-bit or you can save 32-bit. So then you save for 32, because obviously if you want to hear the difference between 16-bit and 24-bit, then you shouldn't save it as 16-bit, obviously. So let me write here null between 16 and 24-bit, and then save as 32-bit float. Save. And then it says here, and this is what we want, your tracks will be mixed down to 2 stereo channels in the exported file, which is exactly what we want. So that's one way you can do it, that you create a file that has the difference between these 2 songs. So you press OK, and you can do the same thing. So I can remove this. This is the metadata from the Paul Bearer song from the MP3. So then you can do the same thing with the MP3 that I showed in the beginning and save a file like that. That just plays the difference. And I just want to show you how this actually plays and looks. So this is the file I just saved. So if you open this one, you see so far it just looks empty. And if I go to spectrogram and choose the settings, up to 48 kilohertz, and then high resolution in the imaging. See, just completely empty. There's nothing to see, there's nothing to hear. It is just silence. And this applies to the other ones as well. So if you choose this one, and in the original one, this is the jazz song by Hof Ensemble, which is also a really nice recording. It sounds really good. Then let's see if this is the same when we try to null them. So then we just need to invert one of them. And by the way, I'll just play you something. When there is, when I haven't inverted the phase, then if I play them solo, they play like that, and I change. But then if I play them together, when they haven't been inverted, they'll just play louder. Like that. So, I invert one of them. And again, it doesn't matter which one. So go to Effect, and then Invert. And we can play one of them. And then we switch. And then together to hear the difference. And again, nothing but silence. And the meters have completely stopped moving here. And it doesn't matter if we go forward. It's exactly the same. It's just silence and nothing else. And if you can hear anything here on YouTube in this video, if you turn up the volume, what you hear is noise from my microphone, my breathing, my noisy computer, my neighbors making noise. But if you do this experiment at home and turn up the volume, all you're gonna hear is the noise from your amplifier. There is no audible difference here. And of course, with this one, you can also save the file if you want to. And that is just for completeness sake. Let's do the last one as well, which is the orchestral song. And as many of you probably know, classical music, orchestral music, is the most dynamic type of music. So this would also be the song where there should be, where it should be the most likely that there would be an audible difference between a 16-bit and 24-bit. This is also the longest song, almost 10 minutes, so it takes a little bit longer to load on my not exactly brand spanking new computer. And again, we just invert one of them. So I think maybe the top one here is the 16-bit one. Yeah, so I think before I inverted the Hi-rez one, original file. So this time I'll just invert this one. Just you see there's no trickery involved. So again, Effect and then Invert. So again, start with solo and then switch to this one and then play the difference. This one. And then the difference. again, the meters have stopped moving. And then if we go forward to the most quiet sections, what about there? Also, it is complete silence. Let's go over here. What about the loudest sections? It is nothing but silence. Go forward to a quiet part. Let's solo one. And the difference? We'll solo the other one. And the difference. Nothing but silence. No movement on the meters at all. So, that shows, at least for these files, and I dare claim for any other Hi-rez file in the entire world, unless it peaks very, very low in volume, then there will be no difference. And then some people might think, well, why is this? Because bit depth must be the resolution, just like megapixels in a camera. So 24-bit must be high resolution, just like megapixels. But that's a question I'll get back to later in this video, after I have tried nulling the sampling rates. And because then towards the end I will talk a little bit about bit depth, what it actually means. Because I have, I'll give you a small teaser, which is that bit depth is not resolution. And if you believe that, then please keep watching, and then you'll get the answer to what it actually is in the end of this video. So the next thing is going to be the sample rates. And then what we can do is we can take the same ones that are downloaded to, downsampled to 16-bit. It doesn't really matter if I use these or use the original ones. But I need to change now the sample rates, and then therefore I need the SOX resampler. So if you have that installed in foobar, you go to convert, and then these buttons down here, the three dots, and then choose processing, which is the resampler SOX, and then configure it. And then here you choose 44.1. And I always have it as quality best rather than normal. I don't see any other reason why. And then 50% phase response is linear phase. And then go back and then press convert. And then we can call that 44. And then do the same thing with this one. And then I can use last used. And then for some reason, this SOX resampler as file name, it always suggests the metadata's track title. So this one is called Blogguden in Norwegian. So that's this file here. So we'll keep the same file name. And then the last one as well. So it's the same thing with this one. It's just a different file name, the metadata's title. And then I'll just show you that now they have all been downsampled to 1644. And that would be that the kilobit per second is 1411, and then the sample rate is going to be 44.1 kilohertz. So you see here, 1411 kilobit per second, 44.1 kilohertz. Same thing for this one. and same thing for this one. So now all three are CD spec. And then what we need to do now is we can again make the difference file, or we can null them in Audacity. But for nulling them in Audacity, we have to upsample, and I'll show you why. First, I'll just do the upsamplings. And then we have to upsample back to 96. So I have to check processing and configure, and then choose this one, or change this one to 96 kilohertz. And then convert. And then we say, then converted back to 96. And the same thing with this one. And that was this one. And the last one. And that was this one. And then I'll just show you that these new files I've made now have then been upsampled again to 96 again. And then if you remember from the first one, since I've only changed the sample rate and not the bit depth, if you remember from the MMMB file, this one was more than 4,000 kilobit per second. And it was 24-bit, and now it's only 16-bit. So now it's less, but it's 96 kilohertz sample rate. Same thing with this one. And of course this one. So, that was all the way it was supposed to be. So, I mentioned that you can either do the difference file, or you can null them directly in Audacity. But I'll show you first the difference file in Audacity. And then I'll explain, afterwards I'll explain why we can't just null directly this 1644 file with the original Hi-rez file. So first, effect, and then invert. And then down here, this is very important, because now this one is the top one, so then it shows project speed 44.1. So then you have to make sure, when you make this difference file, that you choose 96, so it doesn't downsample, because obviously you want to hear the difference between 44.1 kilohertz and 96 kilohertz. So make sure this one is 96 kilohertz. And you choose export as wave, and then it doesn't matter if it's 16-bit here. And then you can say difference between 44 and 96. And then again, it's gonna mix it into one track. And we choose remove this again, because that was from the classical song. And I'll also show you the spectrogram in that file I just exported, and then I'll show you why I didn't just play them like before. So this is the file I just saved. So you see here, there is some difference here. And I'll show you the spectrogram. First, up to 8 kilohertz, but then we, of course, change it to 48. And then 8,000, or whatever you like. It doesn't matter. So, what you see here is up to 22 kilohertz, it's completely blank. How does it sound then? Well, like with the bit depth, it doesn't sound. It's just silent. You can see the meters are actually moving now because it does play content. With the bit depth, everything was completely blank. Here there is content above 22 kHz, but it is inaudible. So that's one way to do it. Let's go forward to the loudest part here. That's one way to do it. You save the difference file. And then the other way to do it, and I'll show you why you can't. Oh, well, first I'll show you why you can't just take the 1644 and the original one and then null them. And the reason for that is that different sample rates can't null because they don't play at the same speed. And sample rate, well, frequency essentially means speed, because frequency means how often something happens. In other words, the speed of something. So therefore, if you have different sample rates, they won't play the same speed. And then, in case any of you that are watching this video have used the program called Wavelab, and you try to mix something in Wavelab in what is called a montage, then if you take two different files with different sample rates and you try to put them into the same montage, it also warns you that they don't have the same sample rate, so that it's going to play at the wrong speed. And that's exactly what happens if you try to null these files. And then if I zoom in here, notice that at one point, this track here and this track down here don't look the same anymore, which happens now, right? Now you see that this one here looks different than this one. Still. And then now this one started to look like that too. So this one up here is the 1644 and this one is the original one. And then what you can see here is that because this is a higher sample rate, then it has more samples per second. Because it's a high sample rate. That's the definition of it, that there's more samples per second than the one with lower sample rates. And therefore, the samples won't be positioned at the same positions, and therefore they won't play simultaneously, and therefore they can't cancel each other out. That's the explanation. So then what I have done was that I downsampled and then upsampled. So what if I opened that one, which was this one, that I downsampled and then upsampled. And when I downsample and upsample, what I do is I remove all the content above 22 kHz, and then that's by downsampling. And then when I upsample, I add content from 22 kHz up to 48 kHz. But it is nothing else than zeros. It's just empty space, right, which I'll show you here by going to the spectrogram. Oh, sorry. So this is the one you can see here in the name, 1644, then converted back to 96. So if I show the spectrogram, what you can see here is that from 22 kHz and up, it is completely empty, right? But, oh, sorry, that was the wrong button. Go back to waveform. But if we zoom in, you'll see that now they match. The downsampled and then upsampled and the original one have the samples positioned at the same places, even though I have removed everything above 22 kilohertz and just added empty space. Right? So that means that now they're positioned in the same place. Now they're aligned, like I mentioned in the beginning. That means I can null them. And then we can, again, of course, also play them before inverting one of them. This is one of them. And the other. And again, if I play them now simultaneously, they're just going to play louder. Solo. Right, so let me invert the phase on one of them. Effects, and then invert, and then solo this one. Sounds the same as before. So does this one. And then let's play the difference. Again, complete, utter silence. But there is an actual difference, although it's inaudible. That's why you can see the meters are moving here. And like I showed you in the spectrogram down here, there is a difference. Right? Because this file up here has all the content above 48 kilohertz. Sorry, above 22 kilohertz, which is exactly what is playing and why the meters are moving. Let's see if this one. So this one I have to adjust as well. Right, it has all the content up here. So that's what is actually playing, which is why the meters are moving, although there's complete silence now. You can go back to soloing one of them. And then the 1644 file. And then the difference. Let's go forward to the loudest part. Complete silence. So, I'll do the same with the others. So we choose this one, and then the original one. And then it must be this one that is, yeah, that's the one that is downsample and upsample. And I'll just show you the spectrogram for this one as well, so you know for certain that there's no trickery involved here. All cut off. Let's see this one. And this one you see goes to around 40 kilohertz. So invert the phase on one of them. Effects, invert. So solo this one. And the other. And then the difference. Let's go forward. And again, you see the meters are moving. There is content above 22 kilohertz in the Hi-rez file, but it is inaudible. Let's try soloing this one again. And this one. And the difference. So, let's try the last one. Although I am fairly certain I can guess how that's gonna turn out. But let's just try to make sure. Okay, and then of course I'll also just show you the spectrograms for these two. I'll just invert this one. Effect, invert. See, spectrogram. And settings. As you can see, it goes to around 40 kilohertz. And then for this one, which is the one that was downsampled and then upsampled, as you can see here in the name. Spectrogram. The settings. Yeah, completely cut off after 22 kilohertz. And then of course we can play them as well. And the other one. And a difference. And like before, the meters are moving a little bit. But again, the difference that is there in the files is inaudible. And again, it doesn't matter if you go to the quietest part of the song. Which could also be here. Or down here. Or if you take the loudest part of the song. It doesn't matter where we go in the song, it is inaudible. Fine. So these are the differences between Hi-rez and CD quality. Inaudible differences, and especially for bit depth, there's no difference at all. And is it possible that you can find some song where there is an audible difference between 24 and 16-bit? Yes, that is possible. Is it also possible that you can find a song where there is an audible difference between 96 kilohertz sample rate and 44.1? Yes, that is also possible, since anything is possible, but especially with the sample rates, I would say it's extremely unlikely. The bit depth is more likely if you understand what bit depth actually means. And in the beginning, I mentioned that I will link to 2 articles from Hi-rez, and one of them is called 24-bit versus 16-bit, the myth exploded. And that explains exactly why there was no difference between the 24-bit and the 16-bit file I played you. And that I think that article explains really well the confusion about Hi-rez, because there are so many people who say that Hi-rez just sounds so much better. And if you watched so far in this video and you are surprised by the results I'm getting, because you actually had thought there would be audible differences, and also if you try this experiment at home and you will get the same results as I have shown here, and you're surprised by that, well, it is probably because you think bit depth means resolution, just like megapixels in a camera, but it doesn't. And that article on Hi-rez, 24-bit versus 16-bit, the myth exploded, explains really well why bit depth doesn't mean resolution. And if you can't wait until you read the article, which is actually a very well written and very easy to understand article, then I'll spoil it a little bit for you. The reason why bit depth is not resolution, but nothing else than signal to noise ratio or dynamic range, is because of a process in the analog to digital converter, which is called dithering. And please read the article and explains exactly why bit depth means nothing else than signal to noise ratio. So that means the difference between 16-bit to 20 and 24-bit is not better quality, better resolution. It just means higher dynamic range or better signal to noise ratio. Specifically, 16-bit is 96 decibels of dynamic range, and 24-bit is 144 decibels of dynamic range. There was one of the grand old men in audio, let's say one of the grand old men on one side of the debate. He was respected by many and hated by probably even more. He had been searching for many years for the recording with the highest dynamic range he could possibly find. And I can't remember exactly the title of it, but it was a Beethoven recording, classical music obviously, that had a dynamic range of 85 decibel. So that means there was still 11 decibels of unused dynamic range on that particular CD. Is there an advantage of 24-bit? Yes, absolutely, in one area, and that is recording. Recording in 24-bit or even 32-bit float, or even 48-bit, like some people do, that has a very good advantage, and that is headroom. Right? That if you record at less than maximum level to avoid clipping, then obviously the lower the noise floor, the better. If you are mixing many different tracks into one song, then obviously it is better to have a lower noise floor and thereby more headroom. And therefore, if you ask me, should I record in 24-bit or higher, I would say yes, absolutely. No question about it. But what we're talking about here is listening to music at home. A delivery format, as it's called, meaning the finished product, then there's no audible advantage whatsoever to 24-bit over 16-bit. Because if the highest recording in history, possibly at least, is the Beethoven recording with 85 decibels of dynamic range, uses 11 decibels less than what is possible with 16-bit, then you get no advantage of 24-bit. So please read the article on Hi-rez so you understand why there's no advantage for 24-bit for delivery format, not recording. Recording there's an advantage, absolutely. And unfortunately, I find that many people who claim that Hi-rez is better than CD quality do it because they don't understand how the technology works. And it has taken me a long time to understand how it works. And I would still say there's still parts of the technology that still I find a little bit difficult to understand because it's a very complex field. And unfortunately, I have yet to meet someone who was convinced that Hi-rez sounds better than CD, who actually understood the technology. And that also leads to the other aspect, which is the higher sample rates. And I would say the main reason why people don't understand higher sample rates is because they don't understand the Nyquist-Shannon sampling theorem. And then partly also because some companies, including even Sony, they use misleading pictures. And the Nyquist-Shannon sampling theorem states that if you sample more than twice as fast as the highest frequency you want to capture, then you will be able to capture the entire signal with no loss, no degradation, and no distortion whatsoever. It's completely perfect. So that means if you want to capture up to and including 1 kilohertz, you just have to sample at a sampling rate higher than 2 kilohertz. If you want to record at up to maximum 20 kilohertz, you just have to record at higher than 40 kilohertz. That is the basis of the sampling theorem. And many people don't understand this because they see these crude pictures where they see these very, very crude stair-step waves and then say, aha, the 44 kilohertz sampling rate has a very crude stair-step, whereas the 96 or even 192 kilohertz sampling rate or 384 or whatever it may be sampling rate, they approximate the analog curve much more closely, and therefore it must sound better, right? But that's a misunderstanding of how digital sampling works, because if the theorem states that you will include everything as long as you sample at higher than twice the highest signal you want to capture, at higher than twice the highest frequency you want to capture, then a higher sampling rate only means you will capture information above the lower sampling rate. That's all it means, which is exactly what I showed here with the spectrograms, that this one here goes to 40 kilohertz and this one here has everything cut off above 22 kilohertz. So the only difference here between these two files is everything above 22 kilohertz up here. That's the only difference, right? And the people who don't understand the sampling theorem, they are convinced by a simple, let's say, trick of the mind, which is bigger numbers are better. If you see 192, well, that's a higher number than 96 and much higher than 44.1. It must be better, right? That's how it seems, because they don't understand the sampling theorem. And it took me quite a while to understand as well. And that's the other article on Head5, although it's not as good as the one about bit depth. It is still a good introduction as well. And the person who wrote the article also links to some other files, some other papers. And then this thing about the stair steps, you might say, well, that can't be true. There's definitely stair steps coming out of a DAC or out of a CD player. Well, if you think so, all you need to do is you have to just plug in an analog oscilloscope to the output of your CD player and feed some pure tones into the CD player or the DAC and see what comes out on the oscilloscope. And what you'll see, it is a completely smooth wave. It's not a stair step wave at all. Right? It is a complicated field, and it's too much to go into details right here, which is exactly why I said in the beginning I will link to a file from xiph.org, xiph.org. He made a file which is he made a video which is on YouTube, which is called Digital Show and Tell, where he does exactly the experiment. He plugs in an analog oscilloscope to his DAC and shows that it is not stair step waves that are coming out of the DAC's output. So then there are also intellectual reasons for saying, well, I want to include the entire signal. If the entire signal goes to 40 or 48 kilohertz or whatever, then I want to include it in the file. And I think that's perfectly fair. If you say that for intellectual reasons, then go for Hi-rez. Then obviously you can't use regular CD quality. But please don't confuse I have an intellectual reasons for choosing Hi-rez with it sounds better. If it sounds better, then you can hear a difference. Right? And for all the people who claim that Hi-rez sounds much better, I have yet to encounter just one person of any of these who have ever shown a hearing test where they could hear above 22 kilohertz. And that's exactly why I will include a link to a hearing test you can do online, where they do a frequency sweep from exactly 22 kilohertz and all the way down to, I think it's 8 kilohertz. And then you can find out where you can find out where your hearing cuts off. And some of these people who claim Hi-rez sounds better because it has frequency above 20 kilohertz or 22 kilohertz. First of all, they don't show a valid hearing test. Instead, they point to these papers, and one of them I read, I think around 5 years ago or so, which is this paper that showed that teenagers were able to, in some cases, to hear test tones at 24 or even 28 kilohertz. But there is something here that is important to remember. First thing is, the people who point to these papers, the audiophiles, none of them are teenagers. If you're watching this video, I'm quite sure you're not 17 years old, are you? You're an older person. If you check your hearing in a hearing test, your hearing doesn't go to 22 kilohertz. Does it? No, I'm quite sure it doesn't. And secondly, there's something else to say, which is, first of all, it was test tones, not music. That was one thing. Second of all, these test tones in that particular test were played, if I'm not mistaken, at 80 or 90 or even close to 100 decibels before these teenagers were able to hear them at 24 or even 28 kilohertz. Right? Let's just be generous here and then say 80 decibels. Right? I want to show you something here. We take the Hi-rez file and then we highlight everything. And then we choose Analyze and then Show Spectrum. Look here. at 20 kilohertz, if you look at the numbers down here, then when I show the cursor, when I put it on 20 kilohertz, it says minus 84, right? And maybe this I don't know if this peaks at 0 decibels. Maybe it peaks a little bit lower. It doesn't matter. 84, right? Let's also take this one, where I think there's a little bit more content at 20 kilohertz. It's a little bit louder in volume. Highlight everything, analyze, show spectrum. 20 kilohertz, minus 69, right? And this file peaks at around 0 decibels. So let's just say 70, and if you go to 24, it's minus 75, right? So let's just say 70. And let's say we take some person who can actually hear content at 24 kilohertz, right? Who was in that particular test that these audio files didn't participate in, but that they still believe proves that when 17-year-old people can hear 24 kilohertz, that means that the audio file himself can also hear it, even though they didn't participate in the test. But they point to this test and then say, aha, this is proof. But remember this, here at 20 kilohertz, or let's say 24 kilohertz, it was minus 70, or actually minus 75. But let's just round up to minus 70. And then the track peaks at 0 decibels, right? And then that means if in that test the teenagers could hear 24 kilohertz, but it had to be played at a sound pressure level of 80 decibels before they could hear it. That would mean 24 kilohertz at 80 decibels, which is in this particular song is 70 decibels below the peak. That would mean the peak would be at 150 decibels sound pressure level. No one, except maybe the most deaf people in the entire world, will be able to tolerate listening to music at 150 decibels. No one. Right? Hopefully that makes sense. And then this was even a file where it was a little bit louder at 20 kilohertz. Whereas when you look at the other file I showed before, it was around minus 90. Right? So that would be even louder. You would have to play that song before someone, in theory, could hear that 24 kilohertz content. And if you have 100 hertz playing at 150 decibels or louder, you won't be able to distinguish content at 24 kilohertz. And that's something that these people who point to these papers seem to miss. Because what they do really is just they point to a paper that shows them something they want to believe in. Right? They don't take a hearing test to prove to other people they can hear to 24 kilohertz. Because they can't anyway. They don't do a blind test to show the rest of us that they can actually hear a difference between Hi-rez and CD quality. Because they can't anyway. They just point to papers that they didn't participate in, and then say, aha, this proves something. Which is, honestly, dishonest. But this is the thing, they are motivated by ideology, and not by truth. But behind that ideology is something else that motivates them, which motivates many people in this hobby, myself included, and that is a simple thing that motivates many people. Curiosity, right? They are very, very curious people. They always want to find new stimulation, new music, new equipment, new speakers, new amplifiers, new cartridges, new DACs, new whatever, right? Which I perfectly understand. Who in the world would not want to find new pleasures in life? That is understandable. Before you had CD for many years, and like the guy who wrote the articles on Hi-rez said, it is not very practical for a company to keep selling the same product for many years. If you invent a new product, people will want to be interested in that as well. And the same thing for an audiophile. Audiophiles change equipment all the time, or at least often, right? It's the same thing, that when they then offered something that is supposedly higher quality, of course they would be interested. I perfectly understand that, right? I really do. I also thought I could hear a difference in the beginning. I did a blind test between Hi-rez and CD, and I thought, oh wow, that was a fairly easy to hear difference between these two. Then I got the result of the blind test. Oh, okay, there was like flipping a coin. Whoops. Fine. And I'll get back to that in a moment, the blind test. Because there is also another reason why some people say Hi-rez sounds better than CD. And that's for actually a valid reason. And the valid reason is that people take a track from HD Tracks or another Hi-rez site, and they compare it to the CD that they have on their shelf, and they say, aha, look, the HD track sounds so much better. Hi-rez must be better. And that's probably true, completely true. But it's not because Hi-rez is better. It is because that particular song has been remastered, which is what often happens when music is being re-released. You remaster it, right? And then that remaster could, in theory at least, just be adding 1 decibel of volume. And then, unless the music is then too loud, then what is loudest is perceived as sounding better. Most often though, when you remaster music, you actually run the music through an equalizer. And you change the EQ on the song. And then I have heard several HD tracks or other Hi-rez tracks from Marvin Gaye, Isaac Hayes, and so on, where the Hi-rez files sounded much more to my liking than the regular CDs from the 90s. And that was simply because the mastering was done well. Right? They had someone remastered it in a very pleasant way. And then the regular CD didn't sound as good. But if you take that HD track and then downsample it to CD quality like I've done here, and then upsample again, and then null them in Audacity, or save the difference file, then you'll hear that there is no audible difference. Right? That's how you need to do it. And unfortunately, people are being tricked a little bit by these marketing tools. That people say, aha, this is just Hi-rez, it's much better. Listen to this file. And then listen to the CD from the shelf. And then they have remastered the HD tracks to sound better. And obviously, it sounds better, right? So please do this experiment at home. And then I'm quite convinced that there are some people now who watched this video and then thought, well, this doesn't prove anything. I know I heard a difference, and don't you tell me what I heard. I know what I heard, right? But if you actually heard a difference, then it would be absolutely no problem to show the rest of us what you heard. And by show us, I don't mean tell us a story about what you think you heard. I mean show us the log from a blind test you passed. And it should be said there have been some people who have passed a blind test between Hi-rez and CD quality. And from what I know at least, of course I don't know everything, but from the ones I have read about, in every single case, the people who passed because their equipment introduced intermodulation, distortion, or things like that. And therefore, if you downsample and an upsample, remove all the content above 22 kHz, and then just add zeros from 22 kHz and up, then you will avoid that your DAC does anything to the signal. And sometimes when people don't upsample, then there's gonna be some clicks and stuff involved when you switch between Hi-rez and CD. And by downsampling and then upsampling, you avoid that. At least then you're completely certain that what you are not listening to is your DAC creating problems. But there are many people who claim that this ABX test cannot be passed. It's made in such a way that you cannot pass it. And I'm sorry to say to all those people, that is wrong. And I'll show you right here now that it is wrong. Right? This is the ABX test here. If you do this at home, if there's the same sample rate, you can have crossfaded tracks. Make sure not to click this one, because in case you have the equalizer enabled, it uses the equalizer settings. I have also given ABX tests to 5 people. All of them were actually women. Not a single one of them were interested in audio whatsoever. And none of these women had ever done a blind test in their life before I gave them one. And one of them has been diagnosed with something along the lines of PTSD. And she is, if I'm not mistaken, she is now around 60 years old. It's a family member. And she suffers a bit from anxiety. And then I gave her the test, and she was like, "Oh no, I don't know how to do these things. Oh, I can't pass this. Oh, I'm too nervous." And I gave her the test and showed her how to do it. And then, if I remember correctly, she passed with either 15 or 16 out of 16 correct. And she had never done a blind test her entire life before, and she passed with flying colors. The 4 other women, who were much younger, had never done a blind test before either. And I showed them how to do it, let them do the test, and they passed with flying colors. There were some tests that I gave one of them where she didn't pass, but I passed, which was just an example of a skilled listener, which was me, and an unskilled listener, which was her. Right? I'm a geek in audio. I can pass blind tests that certain other people can't pass, and other people can pass blind tests that I can't pass. But as long as people don't show that they actually can hear difference, it is nothing but a story. Right? And then people start attacking the test that they have never done before and they don't want to do, because they don't want to give up the pleasure they have had from listening to Hi-rez, and all the money they have spent on equipment, all the money they have spent on the music. And I perfectly understand that. Who wants to be told all the money you spent are wasted? Who want to be told, you know what, the things you thought were true are simply wrong. You are wrong. Who wants to be told that? No one, right? I understand that. But the test works, and I'll show you right here. And I can pass this test in no time. Before I start the actual test, I'll show you how it works. This is A and this is B, and therefore X is one of them and Y must be the other one. And then for every round, there's 16 trials here. For every round, every trial, A and B are the same every single time. And X and Y changes randomly every time. Sometimes it's the same one 2 times in a row or even more. It is random, right? There's a 50% chance it's going to be the same thing, same song again. So this is A, which is the Hoff ensemble, Quiet Winter Night album, and Blå Gutten. And the other one is Launch Tube, that's B, right? They sound completely different, as you can hear. That means one of them is A and the other one must be B. So you see this one, that's A, right? So therefore Y must be B. So if you want, you can time me and see how quickly I can do this test. Now I start. A is X. Next round. Let's set the start here. So A is X again. A is X again. A is X again. Now X is B. So that means Y was A, right? See? X is B again. That means Y is A. X is B. X is A. And actually, I don't even need to listen to A. I can just listen to X. See, that's B. That's A. That's A. I can also just listen to Y. That's B. Y is B. That's B. That's A. So Y is A. That's B. Y is B. And last one. That's B. Y is B. So 16 out of 16 correct in no time. Right? The test works. No matter what the naysayers might say. Is it true that some tests are more difficult than others? Yes, of course it is. Then there are some people who say, aha, you have to listen long term. You can't do it so quickly. Okay, if that is the case, you can do the test long term. And you can do what I've just done long term as well. Because you can take an entire Hi-rez album and then sequence it in Audacity or any other program. Take that and sequence it as one long file, and then take that one long file and then convert it to CD quality, and then convert it back up to Hi-rez, and then do the blind test like that. So then you have an entire album, which people who want to listen long term, they usually agree that if you listen to an entire album, that's enough for long-term listening. And if you want, well, then you can take 2 albums, 5 albums, 10 albums, 20 albums in a row and sequence it, and then downsample it to CD quality, and then do the blind test, right? So you have an ABX test that lasts 10, 20, 30 hours if you want, right? It's very easy to do. So there really are no valid objections to this. But again, the people who object to it is because they don't want to give up the thing they have enjoyed. It's not because they're motivated by truth. They're motivated by their curiosity and their emotional investment in what they don't want to give up, which is the Hi-rez enjoyment. So, this concludes this video. I hope it has been informative, although it was long and boring, but hopefully it was also useful. I am planning to do at least 2 more videos, and the next one is going to be about the one thing that everyone seems to hate. Dun dun dun! And that is dynamic range compression. And it's going to be about how audible is dynamic range compression. Then after that, the third video is going to be about how audible is digitization, which of course is another thing that many people love to hate. If you convert an analog signal to digital, it completely changes, even destroys the signal. That is the claim many people hear. So I thought, how about I investigate it? So, keep your eyes peeled for the next 2 videos, as they say. And then, again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please spread the message about this video. Please also click the links in the description to find the 2L songs and read the 2 articles from Hi-rez. Take the hearing test to see how high your hearing goes. And lastly, watch the video which is called Digital Show and Tell from xiph.org, xiph.org. It's on YouTube. And then in that video, he also not only shows this thing about the stair steps, he also explains a lot about how digital audio works. So if you don't understand digital audio so well yet, that's a really, really good video to watch many times to understand how digital audio works. So thanks for watching and happy listening.